So thank you for joining us today. The last couple of times where I kicked off this meeting, I didn't have very good news, and it continues to be the case. But hey, starting tomorrow afternoon, I'll be laying on a beach in Maui. So I'll think of you guys from there.
Always have to brag, Gary.
I know.
Poor guy.
Get those trips going again. So in terms of water, that's what the topic is today, and I really appreciate Pablo for joining us and giving us the insights in Sacramento. But as you guys probably know, but might not have the most recent data in front of you, you know that 3/4 of our annual precipitation in California typically fall between November and through March. And so, we're hoping for that miracle March, but here we are at mid-March. So we got to keep open. And today our snowpack is sitting at 50% of where it's supposed to be. And the capacity, the Shasta is sitting at 38%, which is not good. Oroville's at 46%. So again, not such good news from the weather front, but yeah, so we continue to take any rain that we possibly can get. And today we're getting a little sprinkling, so that's good. But I don't know about you guys, but we're already running our irrigation system here, and that's not good to be going this earlier in the year. So with that, focus on weather and storage and precipitation. I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about our upcoming meetings.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, we've got our meeting next month, April 19th. It's going to be lithium battery recycling. So that'll be an interesting hot topic, something, whole electrical, environmental interactions. Then we got a couple of other items we're trying to develop later in the year, May and June. We're looking at an update on the Bay Area Regional Reliability Program. That's in a relationship with the larger water agencies in the East Bay on how to better manage through tough drought times like we have now. And is there a way to kind of share and coordinate all of our resources and water systems to maximize our ability to get through tough droughts like we have right now? So that'll be really interesting. They have a whole bunch of ideas they've been working on, and that'll be a great talk. We hope to do that in May. And then in June, we talk about tentatively the effects of sea level rise through groundwater rise in the Bay Area. So that'll be an interesting topic. Those are a couple in the hopper, and we hope to finalize those. As always, if you have ideas on water and environmental issues you want to share, let one of the planning team members know so we can get it in the hopper. And we're always very flexible and able to move items around, particularly if something is like time critical or timely. We can usually shoehorn it in. So do let us know if you know of something that's time critical or timely to hear about, and we'll see what we can do.
Great, thank you, Dan. Now we have approaching 25 people on the line. I can tell you I look very much forward to next month's meeting where we talk about lithium-ion batteries. And George Smith is putting that talk together, and it's a professor out of UC Davis. So that is the future, these lithium batteries. So I look forward to that. So any announcements from anybody, including Lindy, East Bay Leadership announcements?
I don't have anything urgent, but I will put some details about the leadership series. The next part of that will be at the end of this month. So I'll just put some of those details in the chat. Okay, thank you. Any other announcements?
Okay, hearing none. And if you have something that comes to your mind, just go ahead and put it in the chat. So with that, turn it over to Lindy to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, Gary. And thank you, Pablo, for being here. Mr. Garza has more than 17 years of experience working in and around the state capitol. He is currently the chief consultant for the Committee on Water, Parks, and Wildlife. And that is the committee that Rebecca Bauer-Kahan, our local assembly member, recently became the chair of. So we've got a lot of local investment in this committee. The role marks a return to the state assembly for him. He began his career in public policy there. As chief consultant to the committee, he oversees the analysis of legislation in the committee's jurisdiction, works with the committee members and staff to identify relevant policy issues for further investigation through information, oversight hearings, and advises the chair of the committee on policy issues related to the committee's jurisdiction. Prior to becoming the chief consultant, Pablo advocated on natural resources and water policy issues on behalf of the Environmental Defense Fund and as political director for its California Ecosystem Program. Before that, as the associate director of state policy and external affairs for the Natural Conservancy, Pablo worked on similar issues that he works on here at the Assembly. So thank you, Mr. Garza, for being here. And if you wouldn't mind, giving us a little bit more about you, if there's anything I missed in your introduction. And if not, then we're happy to hear about kind of what you've been working on this year.
Great, yeah, thanks for the introduction. And I think that covers my career in public policy, I guess. I'm a native Southern Californian, and then I went to UC Davis for my undergraduate degree, and that's when I started learning all my friends from the East Bay. I had a really good friend from Concord who told me, "You're stealing all of our water," and I had no clue, as a lot of annoying Southern Californians. But all those drives up and down the I-5 and coming and going to school back at Davis, I saw that. I started to see the aqueduct and began to sort of understand California water more than I had before. But now I've lived in Sacramento since the early 2000s, and I feel like Northern California is home now. But I'm still a Dodgers fan. Sorry, I probably don't appreciate any of that. So I'm happy to get into the talk, but I really appreciate the invite to speak with you all. And I remember I talked to the group last year around this time. And I know you're hoping to get my new boss, Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan, and she's great. And unfortunately, the scheduling didn't work. So I'll try to be the best substitute I can here. And I think, she's new to the committee. I think she's in her third term, or halfway through her second term. And I was sitting there in the office on January 3rd, first day back in the legislative session, and one of the other assembly members, Lorena Gonzalez, was saying goodbye, and they sent out this memo to all staff announcing committee changes. And that's when I found out I had a new boss. So it was quite the way to start out a new year. But I've really enjoyed working with her. She's great, and we're off to a good start. And one sort of funny thing, maybe funny, not so funny, is one of the first things we did is we had a kind of informal staff briefing on Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories research on the low to no snow future work they did. That, I don't know if you probably saw that, and it got a lot of press attention back in, I think it was October or November when they released the study. But just looking ahead over the next century and showing, kind of what's the snowpack look like. And as we get to beyond 2075, their modeling and their projections suggest we might have several years in a row where we really don't have a snowpack. So we brought the researchers in. One of them is actually a constituent of my boss, so that was fun. And it's sobering, I guess, is the way to put it. And she quipped with us like, "Well, I didn't realize I was getting the committee with all the good news." We kind of look at these climate projections and kind of what it means for our water supply and management. But we're off to a good start, and really enjoying working with her. We did one hearing on oversight hearing on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And so we're kind of at a really critical point in the overall implementation of that important program. And now we're just getting into the thick of it in the legislative session. We're going to have our first hearing on March 22nd. And then we're kind of off and running till July when there's a summer recess. So you guys started the call with kind of the hydrologic conditions, which haven't been great. And we also getting a little bit of rain this morning here in Sacramento, and my kids are like, "Oh my God, it's raining." I can't believe we went, basically it's been 2 months with no rain. And that's, we all thought maybe in December we might get out of the drought, or at least get an above average year. And that's been just, that hope is dried up at this point. And I think, one of the interesting, I guess last year, when we spoke, maybe other people saw it coming, but the way the snowpack disappeared on us was really alarming. And last March we knew it was dry. We had a decent snowpack, and it anticipate as bad of a year as we ended up having. And I think what folks at the Department of Water Resources and elsewhere didn't really see coming was the way the snowpack evaporated. Basically, by the end of May, I think it was gone, if not early May. And I read a piece sometime early fall about the three culprits: evaporation, absorption, or sublimation. I had to go look up what sublimation is again. It's been a long time since I took physics, but I understand what it is now. They're sort of not sure why, what was responsible, but it's some combination of those three factors. But it's nearly 1 million acre-feet of water never showed up in the reservoirs that was anticipated, and it made last year, I've heard second or third driest on record. I think it depends on. I think from precipitation, it's third driest, but from a runoff, it's second driest. So anyway, it was bad. And I worry that we're looking at the same situation this year. The snowpack, well, Gary, you mentioned it. I think it's less than 2/3 the average kind of across the state. And, it's been a pretty warm winter so far. And, is it going to be warm again this spring? And we're going to see a similar thing where the snowpack that we do have, goes poof, and then it's going to be a long summer. Gary, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so that's what I did mention in the beginning, that our snowpack is sitting at 50% right now, so not good. And as you know, Pablo, as big a concern that we have about the snowpack and the water availability is fires. And so last year was a banner year on forest fires. So that, yeah, we're in a bad spot, no doubt about it. So pray for a miracle March.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so the irony here is all that December precipitation spurred a lot of growth, vegetative growth, and it's going to dry out, and we're likely to have another bad summer. I think last year was our second worst fire season on record. Would have been the worst, except that 2020 was so bad. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't have that experience this year. But I think we're probably looking at over 2 million acres of ground burned again, which just kind of crazy. So I don't know what's going on in the legislature. Maybe I can step back with stop on all the bad news, but we're back. I'm actually at home this morning, but I'll be going back into the office later. The assembly, as of March 1st, all staff are back in person, and they've lifted the mask mandate. It kind of surprised me, but they're strongly recommending people wear masks, but they're not requiring it. And so far, so good. We'll see how this goes. I think the Senate isn't back yet, but there's more people around the Capitol and office buildings there, and it's I have to say it's nice to be back and start seeing people in person. Not sure how I survived a year plus at home with 2 kids and Zoom schools, and both my wife and I working. We got through it somehow, but it is nice to be back and interacting with people in person, and I'm starting to have a few meetings in person as well. So if you're in Sacramento, feel free to stop by either the chair's office or even our office. Be happy to chat with folks. And I hope that these conditions continue. I feel like we've gone through a few up and downs through the pandemic, and hopefully the numbers look good right now. So hopefully that continues, because I think it's just nice to be doing kind of a more normal stuff. The kids are playing sports, and that's been really great to get back out into living life again. So what's going on in the legislature? I guess I think given the hydrologic conditions last year and kind of what we're looking at again this year, I sort of anticipated more policy proposals in the water world, and it really hasn't been as much as you might think or expect given that. But I think there are still a number of bills that we'll be looking at in the committee. I don't know, you probably saw the Planning Conservation League convened a group of water attorneys and some water leaders, and they put out this white paper on recommendations of sort of water rights reform. You know, some of those ideas have made their ways into legislation. I'm probably not, I'm going to have a hard time getting bills off the top of my head, although I can pull up my spreadsheet. But, you know, one example is Assemblymember Robert Rivas has a package of 3 bills, more dealing with water quality issues. The committee doesn't deal with water quality. That's the Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee that's chaired by Assemblymember Bill Quirk, also from your neck of the woods. But you know, one of those bills requires that a member of the State Water Resources Control Board has experience in environmental justice. And it also requires kind of an equity analysis for NPDES permits, National Pollutant Discharge Eliminate. You probably all know what that is. My committee doesn't review that type of work. That's in the ESTM committee, but we do have jurisdiction over the State Water Resources Control Board, and we'll likely hear that bill because of the kind of organizational aspects of it. Let's see, there's a kind of active conversation about water efficiency and conservation. You may recall, you know, there was the 2018 package, Making Conservation a Way of Life, by Assemblymember Friedman and Senator Hertzberg from Los Angeles. And some of those deadlines are coming to pass. Assemblymember Friedman had a follow-up bill last year to kind of set a more rigorous standard for indoor residential use that ended up getting held up actually this January. And but Senator Hertzberg has introduced a bill to set a more aggressive or rigorous standard for indoor residential use that tracks with a report by the Department of Water Resources that they released in November. But it would maintain the current, you know, chances are you've looked at this, but the bill would maintain the current 55 gallons per capita per day for indoor residential use through 2025, and then ratchet it down at the numbers escape me, but I think it would get below 50 gallons per capita per day by 2030. And I know there's some concerns amongst the water agencies about that kind of the last increment of conservation and, you know, how much it will cost and whether or not it's achievable. So I think, you know, that conversation's active right now. It's a Senate bill, so it's over in the Senate right now. If it moves to the Senate, it will come to the committee, and the committee will have a chance to review that and see where we're at. Probably that would be, you know, come later in the year in June. But I think with the overall hydrologic conditions is, you know, this discussion about how we can conserve more, be more efficient with our use is going to be, you know, an important one over the, you know, this year and the coming years. Let's see, with Sigma, you know, I think you have a couple Sigma basins in your area. It's probably not as hot a topic as maybe the Southern San Joaquin Valley, but I know there are a few basins there. And again, someone said in a call I was on recently, there's been this sort of unofficial blockade on Sigma legislation, and I agree. Since it's passed, that's kind of how it has played out. I think eventually that breaks, but again, there's not a lot of Sigma bills out in the universe out in the legislature right now. I expect one dealing with groundwater well permitting and trying to require more coordination between groundwater sustainability agencies and counties. And that will likely be an assembly bill that comes through, and it will come to the committee. But I haven't seen a lot of other stuff on Sigma. I mean, people have been talking about domestic wells and mitigation. Kind of has been a big issue in the San Joaquin Valley, where, you know, groundwater levels will continue to decline, and that will dry out certain wells. So that I know the Department of Water Resources has deemed a lot of, basically the whole central southern San Joaquin Valley, their plans are incomplete right now, and we'll see what they do by late July. You know, as the agencies come back with a revised plan, they're trying to address the deficiencies identified by the Department of Water Resources. And so it'll be interesting in July and this fall to see how that plays out, and whether or not they're able to do things to sort of mitigate impacts on domestic wells and other uses of groundwater. So I think that something we'll continue to pay attention to. Kind of, I could see it leading into either more legislation or frankly more adjudication action. I think some of these basins will probably enter adjudication at some point. My boss has a bill. I think her perspective is we need to take an all of the above approach. We need to be more efficient. We need to conserve. We need to explore, but we also need to explore alternative supplies. So she has Assembly Bill 2016, which I think Lindy had flagged, and some of you have seen, that requires a study of desalination, kind of more a feasibility study of where the state can go and where desalination might fit into the kind of portfolio. We're talking to California Desal, Cal Desal. It's kind of an association. It sounds like you know what that is, and they have some good ideas about possible amendments. So we're in discussions with them right now. And I think, again, I think her perspective is, we need to be open to that. I know ocean desal, as you know, in particular, is very controversial because of the potential environmental impacts from sucking in the water and discharging brine, and also the energy use. But I think she wants to figure out a way to do it where it makes sense, because I think water is just going to be a lot more precious. We're going to have to treat it a lot more precious, as more precious commodity than I think we have up to this point, because of just the scarcity issues we're going to deal with. And there's also a big push on some large recycling projects. Metropolitan Water District is trying to get a piece of the surplus that the state has to help jumpstart a big water recycling project they have planned for their region. So we'll see how that plays out in the budget. The governor has proposed, kind of jumping into the budget, but he did propose $750 million for drought response in his January budget proposal, and that's the legislature's looking at that right now. But back on desal, I think if you guys have thoughts or questions, I think she's definitely open. I think again the bill, it just requires a study at this point. We're hoping that's not very controversial, but I think I think because of the subject, it might be more controversial than we anticipated. But we haven't heard, talked to some environmental groups. No one's really got too excited about it yet, but we'll see how it goes. We'll probably have a hearing on that. It'll probably be heard at the committees next year on April 5th. Let's see, what else? I'll stop there. I don't know if there's any questions on any of that, or I can kind of keep going through, or is there other topics you'd like to discuss, or just specific bills? And I can pull up my spreadsheet to kind of give you some actual bill numbers, if that's helpful.
Thanks, Pablo. Would you mind, giving us just a little bit of history of what studies have already been done on desal in California? I'm just kind of curious, how this is building on maybe the work that's already been done. This is certainly not a new concept for us here.
Sure, yeah, and I'm not any expert on desal, so I'm learning as we go. Like I said, Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan became my boss on January 3rd. She already had this idea to kind of look at it, so I'm jumping in to try and help. But there, I found there was legislation in 2002 by Assemblymember Hertzberg to require a desalination task force that the Department of Water Resources convened, and they put out a report in 2003 that some of you have probably saw it. It's I think it's helpful, but it's very high level. It has a number of recommendations. And it says desal needs to be part of California's water future. And it talks about some of the principles that we should have when looking at desal projects. But it's again, it keeps pretty high level, and it looks like I wasn't, I was just starting out then, so I wasn't even aware of this task force. But I think because of the .com bust and the budget situation the state was experiencing, that they just ran out of resources to kind of do more. And the report does say they had hoped and expected to do more with that study than they ended up doing, but those were really bad budget years. And I think so kind of having continuing to fund the task force, I suspect was just not something they could do. Cal Diesel pointed out that in the 2016, as part of the California Water Plan update, there was a report or chapter on desal, and I haven't looked at that. I just got that, so we're gonna dig into that and kind of read through that. I think it has a lot of more substantive information just at first glance. So kind of we'll need to see how this study required by AB 2016 can build on work that's already been done. It's not intended to replace, or rehash things that have already been done. And then, we've spoken to, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. That's what NAWI, I forget what it stands for. At the innovation, water innovation. Is it the National Alliance for Water Innovation? But Peter Fisk is there, and I saw him present in the fall on desal, and the chair met with him in February and kind of talked to them. And I think we see them as an important resource, and they're doing a lot of work on where desal makes sense and how to kind of put it forward. So I think we want to be talking to all those folks, so we're not kind of rehashing things and kind of adding new, advancing the discussion rather than kind of just looking at what's already been done. But I think the chair sees it as also possibly a job generator. Certainly the projects themselves will generate construction jobs, but she's also interested in looking at ongoing kind of what sort of job, I think kind of as we get a desal plant up and running, what kind of jobs does that create, and can that kind of replace some of the jobs that have been lost in the region? Yeah, Gary.
Yeah, Pablo, so I just wanted to say that I will circle back around with you on this concept of desalination. When I was working at East Bay Mud 100 years ago, actually in 2000, we started an aggressive study in the Bay Area related to a regional desalination concept. And several agencies have continued that discussion. There's been a pilot plant that has been run. There's been a lot of studies that have been done. So the Bay Area is looking at that. And as a part of the Bay Area Regional Reliability study that was done and published in 2018, a regional desal for the Bay Area is something that is suggested to be pursued. So I'll circle back around, and I think your boss it would be good for her to know about those efforts and what the results of those studies have shown so far. And bottom line is it's expensive. It's an expensive source of water, but it is on demand. It is available, and I think it can be done in a fish-friendly way. So anyhow, just I'll circle back around with you and anybody else on this call, because we have all the major agencies in the Bay Area on this call that would like to join in that conversation. I'd be happy to have that. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I would appreciate that.
Pablo, is there any discussion on the broader use and availability of recycled water?
Yeah, I think what Southern California certainly is asking for resources, for funding to kind of jumpstart one of the big projects, and so I think people accept water recycling. To me, is a lot less controversial. It's more about how do we pay for it. It seems like, and where does it, where does it make sense to do it? But I think I believe that it was 300. There was a pot of 300 million for water recycling and wastewater as part of the drought package last year. And that won't get you that far on a big project, but it's a start. And I think we will be looking. The legislature will be talking about putting more funding through this budget, towards water recycling and other kind of drought response activities. But if there's a policy that needs to be changed, I'd be interested in hearing kind of your thoughts on that. But I think I don't see bills or policy changes on that. What I see is more, budget requests and kind of how can the state support water recycling in different regions.
That's good to know. And since you brought up the budget, Pablo, do you have any thoughts on kind of some of the proposals that have been put forward as they relate to water? I know that that doesn't specifically go through your committee, but I imagine it's still word on the street.
Yeah, I have, don't work for the budget committee, but I have some input, and it's budget consultant kind of coordinates with us to get perspectives on it. I think, what was the amount? Let me pull up my old, go back to my spreadsheet. But there was a big package. What was it? $4 billion over 3 years last year, and I think, and the governor's come back with, $750 million in this year's budget, because again, we have a large surplus. So I think, yeah, it's a live conversation. And if you have thoughts on what the state should be funding, I'd be interested in hearing it. And I think the budget committee would be interested in hearing kind of your ideas on that. I think a lot of it, the governor put $500 million towards specific requests, and then left like a $250 million, contingency amount that will be kind of negotiated. And I think we'll see more proposals when he revises his budget proposal in May. And I expect conditions are going to be, they're obviously very dry right now. And I think, like I said earlier, I think we're going to see almost no snowpack by the time we get to May. So I think we'll be looking at, as we finalize the budget this year, the legislature needs to be looking at kind of drought resilience and drought response. And, recognizing a lot of the investments, appropriated this year won't come to pass for a year down the road. But I think we need to be talking about, and I've seen some stuff in the media that's kind of, well, these won't have immediate impact. And maybe that's true, but I think the important thing is we need to change our paradigm on drought response, and kind of make the investments that are going to make us more resilient to drought in the future. Because it feels like this is a really wake up, we're now mega droughts in our lexicon too. It's another, the research that, I think I first saw it in, I believe in fall 2020, when, some researchers were talking about the mega drought that the West is experiencing. And now they're saying it's the worst mega drought in 1,200 years, updating the research. So, we need to kind of dig in and make a lot of investments, it seems to me at least, that prepare us for these kinds of conditions going forward.
Yeah, and just out of curiosity, is there a budget ask associated with the desal study, or
not
the ask is so low, is there not a budget need?
Yeah, no, I think there needs to be, and I think we don't. Yeah, I think she will add my boss will add it to her sort of member request list. But I think I don't know what would it cost to do a study like that, and I think it's probably in the low millions of dollars, perhaps, which is like a big number. It's just, we talk about like they're throwing around numbers in the billions, hundreds of millions of billions right now. So like 2 to 3 million doesn't seem like a lot, but that really is a lot of money still. So I think we need to consult with the department and see what it would take to do the study or feasibility study.
Yeah.
But, needs to be, if there's no resources to do it, that's not going to be a very effective bill.
Okay. Well, maybe that's something we can talk more about with Assemblymember Bauer-Kahan.
Mm-hmm.
Harold Mantle put in the chat, he asked, there's been recent criticism about the agricultural growing almond and pistachios. They use lots of water and the product exported, essentially exporting water itself. Is the legislator looking at that aspect of conservation and conserving water, not exporting to China?
Yeah, I've seen that for a long time. Not directly, I think. Last year, I think Sigma is probably the way that's being kind of addressed. I mean, part of why I think Sigma was fine, we did a statewide groundwater management approach in 2014 was because, well, the drought primarily, but also I think you just saw a lot of these permanent crops going in across the valley, and people just not having surface water, putting in crops, drilling deep groundwater wells. And I think really split kind of the agricultural community because they were seeing the water being pumped out beneath them. So I think over time, Sigma will get at that. There's projections, you've seen them, of 500,000 plus acres going fallow over the life, over the time horizon of Sigma, from Public Policy Institute and others. But and then last year there was, it was Assemblymember Robert Rivas from the Salinas area had a bill to establish a kind of multi-benefit land repurposing program. And there was $100 million in the budget and the drought package for that program, to basically pay farmers and buyout kind of farmers to get them to idle their fields. I think they're looking at a minimum of 10 years, if not permanent. And so that's one way, putting an incentive on the table to sort of drive that kind of behavior. And I would need to look at the proposal. The governor was proposing, I believe, another 50 million in his January budget proposal for that program. And that program is just getting up and running. It's Department of Conservation. But aside from that, there's not an explicit policy proposal that I see going at that. I think, I mentioned well permitting. Assemblymember Bennett, who's from the Ventura area, will have a bill that's trying to set more requirements on permitting new groundwater wells, and I think that indirectly gets at that issue as well. I mean, if you make it harder, people might not just buy up rangeland and plant orchards and drill a deep well. I think those the potential impacts of that need to be analyzed. But yeah, there's not a specific head-on approach to that. Maybe something will come out if the drought continues. Maybe there will be a more direct policy response to that. I know, and but just on Sigma, there is the Indian Wells Basin, which is kind of just south of Death Valley, right? Ridgecrest. They have a groundwater plan, and they submitted that, and they actually were approved by the Department of Water Resources, but they basically allocated zero groundwater to the pistachio growers in the region, because those pistachio growers, as I understand it, came in very recently, around 2014, 2013, when Sigma was being worked on. And so they're kind of junior users of groundwater in that basin. And you have a city and you have the big naval base, right? That's been there forever. And so I think some of those growers are suing because they're not happy that they're not going to have any groundwater to sustain their operation. I think you can understand that, but it's also the basin was clearly over allocated. You have the city of Ridgecrest and a big naval base that have been there for much longer. So I think it's one way that Sigma is can help sort of force these conversations, and they're not going to be easy or pleasant. But I think you can see Indian Wells, at least is one example I'm aware of where that's playing out in real time. And I don't know where all the lawsuits land or end up. But I do think the growers they don't have a strong claim to the groundwater because they're relatively new in the basin. Are there other? Oh, there's a question from Barbara on wastewater. Do you want to talk about this, or?
I think that might have been the question that she asked about recycled water. Barbara, did you have a follow-up to that? No? Okay, wonderful. Well, I do have one other question, but I'm going to open it up a little bit. Does anyone have any questions for Pablo or anything they'd like to share that their organization might be working on? If so, please feel free to kind of raise your hand or put it in the chat. In the meantime, Pablo, I'm curious if you've looked closely at SB 1219, which relates to the State Water Resource Control Board.
Is this the?
It's a proposal to create a blue ribbon commission to look at essentially dissolving the State Water Resources Control Board.
Yeah.
Which, maybe will get no traction at all. And, I know it's already kind of had its hearing postponed. But I'm just sort of curious if you think there's traction there.
Yeah, I did. Thanks for the reminder. I did read the bill. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's going to go anywhere very fast. You should be careful. But I think it's sort of it strikes me as a bludgeon approach to the. I don't know. Like, I know a lot of people have different perspectives on the State Water Resource Control Board. Not everyone is happy with it, but that strikes me as just a completely a bludgeon approach to. If you accept that there's some need for reform, I don't think I'm not saying I subscribe to that perspective, but like if you did like that, you're just getting rid of it and hoping some commission will come up with a better alternative. It strikes me as kind of a bludgeon approach, and I don't think it will go very far. I think if we want to talk about reforming water management in California, it just needs to be a much more thoughtful conversation than that. I think that just, and it's one of the water blogs I read, UC Davis on that was sort of like, well, you get rid of the entity that's doing so many different things, and then you create a commission, and you wouldn't inevitably have an interim where no one's on first to do what the water board's currently doing. And I don't think that's good for anyone, even if you're not a fan of the water board. That's not good for anyone. So I don't expect that to go very far.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem very popular. I mean, Dan Walters is even commenting on it. And
yeah.
his commentary for things that are moving. So
there
was a Cal Matters article for anyone who didn't see it about this, which I'm happy to share if anyone would like to see it. But it looks like someone just put a question in the chat. Thank you, John. It says there are a number of cities developing recycled water enhancements to their wastewater treatment plants and developing recycled water distribution systems to offset potable water use. Sorry. Is there funding becoming available to encourage this kind of development?
Let me see. A little bit, yeah. I pulled up let me see. Like I mentioned, in the drought package last year, there's this pot of money that goes to the water board. It says it's for groundwater cleanup and water recycling. It's actually 400 million. I think I said 300 million. It's 400 million over 3 years. So about 200 million in the current budget year, 2021, 2022, and then 100 million in the next budget year and 100 million after that. So that's at the water board, and I think it's going to. I believe they have an existing water recycling program, but that's. I don't know how you parse out. They threw these pots together of groundwater cleanup and water recycling, but so I'm not sure how much will go to each. But there's in theory there's 400 million out there, and some of that's in play for that, probably for projects like this. And I think there'll likely be more money put towards recycling in the budget to kind of add to that pot, but that's to be determined still, and likely see that later in the summer. And then I think you're talking about even getting more specific. I mean, if there's kind of the banner water recycling, but that does these different components. I mean, that might play out more in the kind of the rollout of the program, kind of how the water board sets priorities, projects and whatnot.
And Pablo, who's distributing those funds?
That pot of money is at the State Water Resources Control Board.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else have questions for Pablo or anything that they'd like to share? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Gary, did you have anything or anything more that you wanted to kind of follow up with Pablo about? Oh, Marguerite just raised her hand. Hi, Marguerite.
Hi, good morning, and thank you, Pablo, for being here. Marguerite Patil, Assistant General Manager, Contra Costa Water. A quick question for you on a completely different topic than we've covered so far today, but I just wanted to pick your brain. As you know, we've got a regional surface storage project, Los Vaqueros Reservoir Expansion Project, that also, by the way, works incredibly well should the Bay Area decide to move forward with regional desal. So there's some interesting synergy possibilities there. We're one of the 7 storage projects that qualified for Prop 1 funding from the Water Commission. And one of the issues that the Water Commission is currently tackling is inflation. They fixed the state Prop 1 awards sort of artificially dated back to like 2015. And of course, since then, all of the projects have seen just this tremendous inflationary, pressure on all the projects. Water Commission is looking at potentially doing another small inflation bump at their meeting tomorrow. But, we've kind of worked with staff and run the numbers and seen that, the discrepancy is well over 20–25%. That is what we've experienced so far in inflation, not to mention just trying to get it to midpoint construction. So we have collectively the 7 projects, reached out to folks in the administration to see, is there any appetite or any ideas of how to find additional funds for an inflationary boost? And I was just curious if you'd heard anything where you're at, or if you had any feedback or suggestions for us.
No, that's actually news to me, but not at all surprising, right? I think, those big infrastructure projects always seem to increase in cost the further you go along. Given what we've experienced the last few years, yeah, that's not surprising at all. I don't know. So it isn't on my radar if you are proposing, or the projects that have funding allocated to them are proposing solutions. I'm interested. I'm sure the committee and the chair would be interested in hearing your ideas. I think one of the challenges is, if I remember correctly, they allocated almost all of the pot. I mean, like 2.7 billion, and then some that goes to administration. And I think the only projects that's fallen through the cracks was Temperance Flat, but they got about 100 million. And then I think, some of that money was reallocated to other projects. But so I don't think the Water Commission really has a lot of additional resources available to it to reallocate to deal with that. So I think that's something the legislature might need to step in and consider, like, what do we need to sort of augment that pot to help deal with these inflationary pressures. There's also a bond issue. So obviously the legislature the state cannot issue bonds without approval of the voters. I think it's like a 500 million. No, I think it's, there's a threshold in the Constitution, but it's pretty low. Like, so to do a meaningful bond issue, you need to go to the voters. So that's a heavy lift too. So yeah, if you have thoughts on that, or your group projects have thoughts, I think it'd certainly be interesting hearing them, and maybe we're something you could consider for the budget surplus to kind of help augment the resources the Water Commission has available to them. But it strikes me that they can only do so much, because that was a fixed amount in the bond issue from 2014.
Great, thanks, Pablo. Yeah, that's correct. We're looking at other sources of fund beyond Prop 1. So yeah, great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that too, Pablo. And thanks, Marguerite, for bringing up storage, because the East Bay Leadership Council is very supportive of expanding Los Vaqueros and Sites Reservoir. And so, Marguerite, not to put you on the spot, but it seems to me that given the fact that Assembly Member Kahan is new to the water arena, it might be worth a meeting set up specifically to educate her on what's been happening with storage. And here's a project that's right in her district, basically. And so I would encourage that we take advantage of that and do that. Does that sound okay to you, Marguerite?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I can't speak on behalf of the other storage projects, but we have coordinated extensively. So I think everyone, to one degree or another, is very concerned about this issue and interested in potentially participating in any discussions. So
yeah,
great. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Pablo.
Yeah, no, I know she's aware of the Los Vaqueros expansion. I believe she toured it before she was chair. And so she she's on the record in support of that project. And so she's aware of sites. She doesn't have a position on that. So if your folks are supporting that, I think you should be interested in hearing that perspective as well.
Thank you for bringing that to attention, Marguerite. Pablo, there's also a question in the chat from Emily from Central Sand. She said the legislator seems to be continuing to work to address PFAS. While these may go to the ES&T committee, do you have any thoughts on these bills? As you know, water and wastewater are not producers, and yet we unfortunately are left tackling the issue. Thoughts?
Yeah. And again, there was funding. I lost my budget. I think there's $100 million in the drought package last year to specifically address PFAS. But this has been an active conversation. I'm just on the periphery because I don't deal directly with the committee. Doesn't deal directly with water quality issues, but a lot of water agencies have come forward saying, I believe the state board adopted a standard, and they're concerned about the cost of achieving that standard. And so that is a live conversation, kind of ways to, hopefully the legislature or the state can provide some resources to, mitigate the cost of that. But that's playing out in real time.
Well, thank you, Pablo. Hopefully we'll see those continue to move forward. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Gary, I might hand it back over to you just to kind of, give us a little bit of an end to this meeting. Again, Pablo, thank you for being here. And it sounds like we do have some things to follow up on as a group. The task force might continue to talk about this desalinization bill and kind of how we'd like to be involved.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But I think that, certainly some of the other issues that have come up, like the inflation issue, might be something you continue to hear from us about, or that we will approach the assembly member on. So thank you for being here. Gary, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Pablo, thanks a bunch for spending time with this group and giving us an idea of well, for one thing, what you're doing in terms of your role. It's a very important role that you have in terms of the water world and the water supply projects that we talk about, educate ourselves on, we advocate for, in favor of in the Bay Area. So thank you for your time. And I don't have anything else to offer. If any of the other co-chairs want to speak up, this is your chance to do that. But otherwise, look forward to seeing this group next month.
Hey, Gary.
Maybe in person. Yeah. Hey, George.
Gary, yeah, just a couple more details on our April 19th meeting.
Yeah.
On the lithium ion car battery recycling. You had mentioned it briefly earlier. Just a little bit of information that was required by law by California Assembly Bill 2832, that an advisory group be formed to study the potential issues, including environmental impact of lithium ion car battery recycling from electric vehicles. There's multiple stakeholders. That group is headed by Elisa Kendall. She's a professor of civil environmental engineering at UC Davis, and she will be our speaker on April 19th. And that they are actually meeting as we speak. I'm going to jump on to that call, that public meeting when we sign off here. They will be finalizing their report. They've been studying this for the past at least 1 year. And they'll come out with some analysis and recommendations, and that'll be the topic for that meeting, our meeting on April 19th. And I'll send any of you that need a copy of that report. It'll be available before our next meeting. I'll make sure I send it to our committee leaders for distribution.
Great, George. Thank you. That'd be appreciated. I can include it in the announcement.
Thank you.
Thanks, George. Any other co-chairs out there? So hearing none, thank you all, and hope to see you next month in person. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have fun in Hawaii.
Thank you.
Have fun on the beach. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I will.
Hey, thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Pablo, for coming. Good to see you.
Thanks, Pablo.